You are now entering the box. All right, welcome back Inside the Box. Today we have Ryan McCrady, President and CEO of Springfield Sangamon Growth Alliance. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me in. I appreciate it.
Yeah, excited to talk to you. One, I would love to hear more about the Springfield Sangamon Growth Alliance, but also the exciting project you have going on with the Scheels Sports Park.
Absolutely. The Springfield Sangamon Growth Alliance is what's called an economic development organization. So in our industry, they used an acronym EDO. And we are not a unit of local government. We're actually a separate nonprofit.
Okay.
We're focused on growing the economy of all of Springfield and Sangamon County. So the metric is we want more people living and working here in our community to help grow the economy. We do our work through funding we receive from both the public and the private sector. So we have many public organizations that provide funding, the City of Springfield, Sangamon County Board, Airport Authority, the Water Reclamation District, the Mass Transit District. I'm going to forget somebody. And then we have about 28. That's right. There's about 28 private companies that also provide funding to us.
Yeah, I was looking at some of the members. There's some pretty big companies that are members, it looks like.
Really fortunate to have the individuals that we have investing and sitting on our board because it gives me as president and CEO an opportunity to tap into that brain trust, right?
Yeah.
And so much of the work we do in economic development is relationship and networking based.
Oh, yeah.
And so to be able to reach out to those individuals and say, hey, I'm looking for a connection here, a connection there. Do you know anybody? They have some pretty significant connection networks. I almost said Rolodexes. That would show my age. But they have pretty significant network of people to draw into. And so, we really, in the work we do in economic development, the best way I can explain it, because it's somewhat of a mystery, and I think sometimes people don't fully understand what we do, but there's really three legs to the stool. Business retention is the first thing that we focus on. So keeping the businesses that are here, checking in with them, finding out what's going well, what they might need help with, getting their feedback on maybe different types of policy decisions that could happen that could benefit their business, things like that. And then the second part of after retention is business expansion. So how do we meet with the business? How do we get them to go from 5 to 10 employees or from 1 to 5 employees or 15 to 20? That's really the best way to grow your local economy because it gets the biggest economic impact because you're probably not going to the city or the county and saying, look, I need you to build a new road here. I need you to put a new sewer line or a new water main in here. It's almost all growth. It's almost all ROI when you go about it that way. It's probably the same thing in your business, too. It's easier to grow a customer than it is to get a new one.
Yeah.
It's the same thing in the work that we do.
Okay.
And then the third part of it, business attraction. And I think a lot of people think that's what we spend our time doing, flying all around the country, going, sitting courtside at NBA basketball games with developers. I haven't gotten to do that yet, so maybe I'm doing it wrong. But
if anybody would like to, I'd be open to
it. We do go out, and a big part of what we do is we sell the brand of our community to businesses and consultants that look to locate places. And so we spend a good bit of time networking out there. Our primary target on attraction is what's called a site selection consultant. So most companies don't go and look for sites themselves. They typically work through a consultant for a couple reasons. It gives them that buffer between predators like me who, want to connect and want to sell right there.
Yeah. And
then it also allows them to access a knowledgeable individual as a consultant that can help on site location and help with things like how do we find where utilities are, what kind of incentives are located, and those types of things.
Interesting.
So when we develop a deep relationship with a site selection consultant, we really have access to their whole portfolio of clients, which is probably dozens for each one of them. So a lot of our attraction efforts on that consultant side, we do some one-to-one on particular businesses. That's typically more on the retail restaurant side of things.
Okay.
But on the non-retail restaurant, we look to attract those consultants. Now, we also market our community internally and externally. So we have a Thrive and SPI campaign. That's a community marketing campaign. So we market internally to improve the self-talk of our community. What we say is what you think becomes what you say, and what you say becomes what you do. So we want to make sure that we are talking to ourselves and having good self-talk. Then that platform is also what we use to market externally. because we have to also market externally to people. Because let's say you're looking to attract talent into your business. You can explain to them what the pay is, what the benefits are, what it's like for a day in the office.
Yeah.
They're probably not coming by themselves. They're probably bringing
Right.
other people with them. So we have to be able to sell the community too. And that's a pretty heavy lift to put on your shoulders to say, now you have to sell the whole community. So that's where we can come in with Thrive and SPI to help attract workforce and to attract residents and run parallel alongside our businesses when they're trying to attract talent.
Okay. Interesting.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and it's I mean, everything kind of you just talked about, I mean, hit home a lot. Like, I started this business and I didn't really know what I was doing. I never had a business really, you know what I mean? But getting it started, finding a location, people, I mean, it's not easy for a small business nowadays. It's crazy.
Yep.
And it's really crazy because small businesses really are the ones that pay the most in taxes, you know what I mean? And I feel like they don't make it easy for us at all.
It's difficult. And a couple things. Also in a small business, so every minute you're spending trying to hire somebody is a minute you're not spending out trying to connect with a customer and generate revenue.
Yeah.
So it's like double the cost
Yeah.
for you. So there's an opportunity cost of missing the revenue, and you're spending your own resource trying to attract somebody. So it is a problem. As far as small business impact on the economy, and most people are surprised to hear this, is that if you look back at, let's say, Fortune 50 companies today and look back at where they were 10 years ago, they probably employ the same or fewer number of people now than they did. Historically, globally, in the global economy, job growth has always come from what's called small business. Now, the federal definition of a small business is any business under 500 employees. That's the Small Business Administration description.
Which is crazy. I'm like, man, you got 500 employees.
Right. It wouldn't feel like a small business,
it's hard
right?
for me to even feel like a small business with, 15 employees.
Yeah. Small businesses create a lot of economic impact for a number of reasons. One is that because they're a small business, they don't a lot of times have all the resources on staff. So they tend to contract out for resources. So guess what that does? That improves the economic impact.
HR,
that supports other businesses in the community. So you're absolutely right. We try to bring resources to help. So we have what's called the Small Business Development Center. That's a division of the Small Business Administration with Kevin Lusk.
Kevin, he's been on the podcast before.
That's right. So if I get an entrepreneur or someone that wants to open up a business, that's one of the first connections I send them to. Helping a small business is a real niche in economic development. Helping entrepreneurs is a niche.
Yeah.
Kevin really fills that well and provides a lot of great resources and tools to them. We also have the Innovation Center through the University of Illinois at Springfield, downtown. That's also a great resource to assist with the small businesses that are starting, and do everything we can to try to help in that way too.
When you say the Innovation Center, are you talking about the I can't think of the
incubator?
the incubator.
Yeah. Sometimes it's called SPI Innovate Springfield.
Yeah, that's a cool space.
It's a really neat space, and
that actually opened up kind of when I was starting Ootbox, and I had considered at one point getting an office there. I ended up just working out of my house for the most part, but it was a cool space. I've been in there a few different times.
It's been good. The Growth Alliance financially supports them, but we also support them on operating and collaborations that happen there and tapping into the university network. And Rob Kerr, that runs that now, is really brought a lot of neat resources to bear there too. So we have those support services. But yes, a small business is, well, you're feeling it every single minute of the day, right? It's a heavy lift.
And I'm curious your thoughts on this. If it feels like it's pretty well known how important small businesses are, but it feels like even still that we don't get like the help from, like health insurance.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, it's crazy. I'm trying to offer it to my team right now, and it's like the prices, it's like, it just feels like they don't want you to succeed. It's so nuts between just all the different things. It's so hard. It's
really tough. The Growth Alliance, there's myself and 3 other employees.
Yeah.
And so when we go to buy health insurance, it's, there's not a lot of options.
Yeah.
Not a lot of and companies will want to take on a group that small. I'm sure you're dealing with that too, and what you're dealing with also.
Yeah, like we, like I pay right now. We do have like something that we offer here, but it's just so expensive that it's not really worth it for anybody to do it. So, I mean, I do it with my family, but it's like over $1,800 a month,
right,
for me and my family. And I'm like, you know how much money I could put back into the economy if I wasn't spending that much? Like,
it's really something that has to be addressed. It's how we figure out how to make health insurance. Boy, this isn't a whole nother topic.
Yeah, and
but I mean,
you're not the health insurance guy.
I have some personal feelings about this. Is I feel like there's been a confusion between health care and health insurance.
Right.
Like they've been blended together.
Yeah.
Really, what we need you to have is access to health care. In my opinion, that's a human right. Right. You should be able to you and your family should be able to get access to health care.
Right.
Health insurance is a way to access health care. So how do we come up with a way for small businesses and entrepreneurs to access health care in an affordable way?
Yeah. So I just want my team to be healthy, feel comfortable, you know what I mean? Trying to offer stuff,
it's a big attraction thing. And if you've ever been a part of a family that's going through a health crisis with one member, I mean, it impacts the whole family. So it's a big problem. It's another distraction to running the business. And I hope, we at the Growth Alliance, we do everything we can to explain to policymakers that whatever programs they're developing to attract and support business, we're always there to say, make that scalable.
Yeah.
Make that work for the 5-person shop as well as it works for the 500 or 5,000 person shop, and trying to develop and make sure that they can access. And I think, in the state of Illinois, the current administration in the governor's office has made some adjustments to economic development programs. And we finally, as economic developers, we finally felt like someone listened to us.
Good.
That they're starting to understand the real benefit of programs that retain and expand as much as attract, right? Mm-hmm. It's kind of like when you're a customer at something and you see this great special for new customers, and you're like, hey,
right,
what about the special for that?
Yeah.
The customer's been around for 10 years, man. I think that
all the time, yeah.
I know.
I'm like, well, let's sign up with a different email address.
Right. So how do we, and that's not easy. It's not an easy answer. I'm not saying it is, but I feel as economic developers, we see the benefit of small businesses. Yeah. And honestly, when I talk about business retention expansion efforts, in our gang, we have over 100 of these meetings every year around town. I think it's easy to assume that we're meeting with all the big businesses in town. It's just the opposite. Because there's a large business in Springfield isn't sitting around saying, man, if we could get McCrady out here, we could solve this one really tough problem that we have. Yeah. They have probably a pretty good group of smart people on staff. It's the smaller to mid-sized companies that are really busy doing their business every day, and they got this thing that they're trying to get to, right? And that's a spot that the Growth Alliance can fill. So most of our work is on the small to mid-sized businesses because we're a kind of a gap-filling resource there and a connecting resource that helps them do their job.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know we've hired a couple different people over the years that have moved to Springfield. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And I'm like, man, I feel like there should be some incentive for bringing these people, getting them to come here.
Well, I mean, we do. I don't have an incentive. We do try to provide programs. We have our Thrive Ally program.
I saw that.
Yeah. Which has been good for individuals because
seems like a good program.
It's hard, right? When you move to a community and you probably bring other people with you, a family with you, and you work every day. I mean, we all probably like people we work with, but we don't want to share everything with them, right?
Yeah.
And so, how do I get my family integrated? Like maybe my faith is important to me. How do I connect to the right faith community? How do I find a dentist? How do I find a doctor? I want to play pickleball. I want to get into the running club. But I don't want all my coworkers to be burdened with all that.
Right.
So the Thrive Ally program gives individuals an opportunity to say, hey, I'm here, and these are some things I know about in the community if you want to connect there.
So how's that work? Say we have, like right now we have somebody moving here from Indiana.
Sure.
When you talk about these programs, is it like, I would, for example, be like, hey, why don't you check out the Springfield Sangamon Growth Alliance and send them to the Ally page?
That's right.
Okay.
And they would scroll through that page and they would see the people that are when you sign up to be an ally, you offer that your expertise in some different areas,
Yeah,
or
I
I
saw
can
that
help
each
connect
kind
there.
of have a couple of different categories.
And then the ally decides how they're comfortable with being contacted, whether it's email or social media, or some people put their phone number out there. And they get contacts. Hey, I see you're involved in the arts community. My family and I, we like to perform in community theater. Can you connect us with something there? What that's going to do for you as an employer also, it's going to help that person, make them what I call more sticky. When they get that call to go work some other town, they're going to think, okay, that's a new job, but man, I have to reset my whole network.
Right.
I'm in this really cool group. I do this. I got these folks I meet every Wednesday night or Thursday night, and we do this fun thing. It's one of the things we try to do to get people to stay here. So when they get here, we try to get them acclimated, and we try to get them engaged and weaved into the community to help our employers retain talent here too.
Well, it was interesting. I talked about kind of some of that stuff you talked about kind of hit home. When I was out of college, I worked at a sign company, and my plan was always to get my 5 years under my belt of experience and then move away. And there was various things that happened near the end of that plan that made me change my mind. A couple of those things was I met my wife, girlfriend at the time, now wife. My dad got sick. But also, as that was happening and I kind of started this business a little bit, I wasn't sure how far I was going to take it. I started getting involved with Visit Springfield and just some different things, talking to new business owners, and really realized and that was, let's see, that would have been 2014, 15. Okay. So, I'm out of college. I'm 25 years old, and I just start to honestly, I've lived here my whole life basically, and I just start to realize how much is actually going on here.
Right.
You know what I mean? I didn't even know the stuff that was happening and how many different things were going on, all the stuff downtown. And I'm like, man, I didn't know about any of this stuff.
And that's why it was so important we started Thrive in SPI in 2020 is for that point exactly. We've not been marketing internally. We've not been telling people about things that are going on. And in the work that you do every day, that when you go out there as this positive force, you put yourself out there, right? Become a little bit vulnerable. And if you look at our social media sites, and when we run a digital ad about being the 5th most affordable city in the U.S., the comments, people are taking shots. I don't believe that. Did you make up this number? So, you want to be that positive force, but you do have to be mentally tough when you do it because you do put yourself out there. But despite that, it gives us a chance to engage and have a conversation and say, well, these aren't our rankings. These are, here's a source for that. And is there anything we can help you with and other places in the community help improve your experience? And but we keep doing it because it's important. And the other thing, a quick story on business attraction. So let's say I get a great relationship with a site selection consultant, and they call and say, hey, we're bringing our client to town on Wednesday to meet with you about the site you have, where they might want to locate. Great, okay. Well, they tell me they're coming on Wednesday. I know they show up on Tuesday. Yeah. And they go around town and talk to people. They know what I'm going to tell them. There's really no better place in the world for you to be than here.
Yeah.
But they feel like they want to get their own opinion. So they come to town and they go out to eat, go to the stores, talk to the staff. So they're trying to measure the mood of the community before I get engaged. Yeah. And so that internal self-talk and marketing becomes really important from that perspective too.
For sure. Are you familiar with CILCSA?
I don't.
Central Illinois Customer Service Association?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Yep.
I sit on the board of that group, and that's what we do. It's all about customer service, providing that experience to help uplift the community overall, because when people come to town, or whatever it may be, the better customer service everybody's receiving, the more positive reaction they're going to have and want to be here.
Yep.
Whether you're living here or moved here or visiting. And I've sat on various boards over the years, and I love that group. They're a great group. I love what we're doing. It's fun. You know what I mean? The events we host are awesome. I love the speakers we get and stuff like that. Yep. But it's kind of along the same lines a little bit.
It absolutely is. And that's a really important group, the work that's going on. And I always try to remind myself that, yes, I'm involved in customer service on what I do, quote unquote, 9 to 5. on the flip side of that, when I'm a customer, I'm also involved in customer service.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to remember that, people say sometimes you hear a lot, there's no good customer service anymore. Well, I also think some of what you get's a little bit of a reflection of how you walk into the place too.
Right.
And so even as a customer, maybe I'm not satisfied with something that happened. I try to remember that I can also be respectful.
Or if you're in a bad mood going in
there. Yeah, that happens, right? You know what I mean? The kids wouldn't get ready for school, and the dog wouldn't go to the bathroom when I put it out this morning. I'm 10 minutes late. Yeah.
That might not be their fault. Just sends you off the deep end.
So I also try to remember I need to be a good customer too.
Yeah.
On both sides of that. But yeah, the work that you're doing with that group is really important. And they really do. They do a nice job, and I just love watching the stuff they're doing because everybody's super excited. About being part of it.
Appreciate that.
So,
and they were super welcoming when they talked to me about joining the board and all that stuff. So yeah, it's been nice.
Great. That's great.
Definitely one of the boards I've stuck with.
That's important. I appreciate you spending time on that, doing those kind of things. It's really beneficial, and I think it enriches your experience in any community, but it's also personally enriching too because you're going to be around some people that maybe you wouldn't normally have been around. And helps you learn and expand your network. And
and I mean as a small business owner, I've learned very quickly. You were talking about earlier about just having all those businesses that are members and being able to reach out. Do you know this person? Do you know that? Like, sure. I've learned how important that is and can be, to your business.
Absolutely.
As much as I wish it wasn't, just because it's like, oh, geez, I got to figure that. Yeah, no, but I do enjoy meeting people, and that's one of the reasons I do this podcast. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't think we've ever met before, but Ryan suggested having you on. I was like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. Let's meet and chat because I just love learning about people's businesses, what they do, and you know what I mean. So anytime when there's an opportunity to sit down for an hour and have an uninterrupted conversation,
We're happy to do that. And I think podcasts have been a really effective tool in doing that. And I've done a number of them now, and the traffic, the viewership that they have is viewership. The listening or the impact or the connections that they have are impressive. So I appreciate you doing it.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. I've always just kind of done it for fun, and we don't get like huge numbers, but it's funny because like over the last couple of years, like something like Spotify at the end of the year, they send you like, here's all your listener data, and they kind of present it to you fun. But then in it, like it was like you're the top podcast for 5 people, and I'm like. Okay, it's only 5 people, but the top podcasts, like really, like that. You know what I mean? It's just encouraging. Like, wow, 5 people listen to us more than any other podcast. That's pretty bizarre.
But that's interesting because don't you think? At least I think a lot of times is I want to be good before I'm big.
Yeah.
And okay, so there's 5, but do you? And I'm sure you deal with this in the work that you do every day. Is you got to be careful. You can get too wide and shallow.
Right.
Do we want to go deep here, or do we want to go wider?
Well,
and
just growing my Oop box. We just hired our first salesperson, and part of that was probably a fault of mine that I was a little bit scared of growing too fast and then providing bad customer service.
Right.
And obviously there's extra stress and everything that comes along with that. But we've kind of put the fuel to the fire, this last year or two, and have really kind of started pushing for growth and feel like we're more ready for it. So,
well, business growth has to be a tricky thing to navigate because if you don't do it correctly, you can increase your revenues but not increase your profitability.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's
especially when you're trying to like, all right, when do I hire? You know what I mean? So we're playing that game right now because we're closing sales, but it's like. I want to hire ahead because I don't ever want to provide that bad level of customer service or stress everybody out here.
Sure.
So trying to navigate that and make those decisions, from budget standpoint and all that has been definitely something to deal with.
and it's always hard to understand too that there's not like a linear relationship. It's not a perfect straight line between, the things that happen in business. It's more of a quadratic, and you're always trying to live on this. The apex of the curve a little bit where you minimize your expenses, maximize your revenue and profitability, which is it's tough. It's tough to figure out where that can be. And one of the things I talk about, so I spent about 20 years in government work. So
Okay.
I was county administrator here in Springfield.
On both sides of it.
Yeah. So I was chief appointed official of county government and left Springfield in 2008 to go be city manager in Decatur.
Okay.
I ran the city there until 2015, and then I went into economic development at the Economic Development Corporation there. So,
Nice.
So I've been kind of, I started my career in banking back before I fell into government work. So,
Yeah.
been on the private and the public side of it, and particularly on the public sector side of it, it's all about how do we cut the budget,
Right.
how do we cut expenses, how do we become more efficient, and I'm a fiscally conservative kind of person. People wouldn't be surprised to hear me say that. But at the same time, what I try to explain is it's okay to be efficient, but we still have to be effective.
Yeah.
And so how do we not get so efficient we're no longer effective? Yes,
Right.
This would be cheaper if we cut all this stuff. But I think we also need to be measuring the opportunity cost of not doing some things if we had the resources, right?
Yeah, I'm constantly looking at that with like software. Like, all right, does this make us more efficient? Obviously, we're spending more up front, but what's the long term here? Are we offering a better service? Like, yeah,
right. And trying to be effective, trying to understand the opportunity cost that exists with those things. It's tricky. It really, really is tough. And it's tough to do in any sector. It's tough to do in business. It's tough to do in the public sector too. And I think a lot of times, if the general public would try to think about that from like the government perspective, that they might get a better government out of it. They might get a government that understands that investing in certain things makes them more effective. And so what are they more effective at? Hopefully providing those critical services to you as a taxpayer that you need. So yes, we can go in and cut the staff 25%, but how effective are we going to be? How long is it going to take to get your road plowed when it snows?
Right.
What happens when the water main breaks outside your house? When you call for emergency services, how long does it take them to get there?
Yeah.
So do you want the most efficient or the most effective? I think we probably want a balance of that, right?
Yeah.
And
tough balance to figure out.
It's really, really tough, and there's a lot of strong opinions about what things we should and shouldn't be doing too to get the balance in there. So, but it's trying to find that balance between efficiency and effectiveness is always a struggle.
Yeah, and like when I've looked at politicians and stuff, sometimes the ones that are more business savvy are the ones that I'm attracted to, because sometimes I feel like the government needs to be ran more like a business.
Mm-hmm.
And I hate to say that, but it's in the end it kind of is,
Right.
And if we're operating at a loss all the time, well, that ain't a very good business. And I mean, obviously they don't need to be profitable, but
Sure.
I don't know, but that's a whole nother story, I guess.
It is, and I don't disagree with you. I feel like a lot of citizens want that.
Yeah.
But if we want that, and I'm partial because I've been on both sides of it, right?
Yeah.
If we want that, then as citizens, we have to be open to government doing some things in a different way. So let me give you somewhat of a hypothetical, but also a little bit of a real situation. So let's say we have to build a government building for something, right? For some kind of resource to be in. It's not unusual that happens. In a typical scenario, a government will design a building, do all the specifications, and bid it out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what most taxpayers want is they want that to go to the lowest bid.
Right.
Okay? So let's think about if this is a fairly large building, let's say it needs 10 or 12 rooftop heating and ventilation units to be able to serve it properly.
Yeah.
The cheapest thing is to just put those 10 or 12 rooftop units on there. That's the cheapest construction.
Right.
The cheapest 40-year cost is to install some type of air handler, chiller, boiler system. But if a contractor bids that,
they're more expensive.
They're more expensive up front.
Yep.
And if we look at the way a business would look at this is the 40-year total cost of running this building. What's the total cost over 40 years?
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at that, about 60% of that 40-year cost is operations and maintenance, not construction.
Yeah.
But the way a lot of citizens want to see government operate is they want to see it built at the lowest upfront cost.
Yeah.
But what they're not realizing is it's going to actually get more of a tax burden for them over the next 40 years. I've been in those situations before, so
I can totally understand that.
It's a tough balance. It's tough to explain.
And unfortunately, probably most of those citizens are ones that don't understand, that business side of it,
Right.
So
that's right. So and
good points.
It's all
though,
about
to think
communications and everything else. Hopefully, no one's falling asleep through that stuff.
No,
but
I think those are good points. You know what I mean? That's all stuff you got to consider. I mean, it's just like buying a house. Does it have a new roof on it or not?
Right.
You're gonna have to replace the roof in 5 years or what? Yeah.
Exactly. So. And you have to try to think about that overall cost over the life cycle, whatever it is. So, yeah, it's a tough one.
Yeah, that is a. So I guess this kind of can segue a little bit into the Scheels Sports Park.
Yeah, it does.
Because that's kind of a mixture of both, right?
It is, yeah.
Can you explain your guys' involvement with that?
Sure. So the Scheels Sports Complex is it's good for that to be in the title of it because was a complex project. I don't know if that was done on purpose or not, but the Growth Alliance, this is a good example of what the Growth Alliance can do to assist with development. So obviously the city of Springfield plays a critical role in this. Also, the other local governmental bodies do too because of what's involved with property tax base and everything else. And at the same time, you have private developers that want to develop the sports complex.
Yeah.
Private developers have needs. The government has needs. The Growth Alliance sits in between the middle of those two parties. And then we help them, both parties get answers to questions that they might have about the other party. We can provide input to policymakers on what the economic impact is of making certain decisions or making, offering different types of incentives to it. What made this project difficult was that the way it's built is very unique. Okay, so most sports complexes that you'll see are built and owned by a unit of local government. So maybe a city or a park district says, we're going to build this sports complex because we know it's going to bring all these people to come in and stay and shop and spend money. And then we're going to make the sales tax revenue off of that. And what we hope is that sales tax revenue is enough to cover the cost of paying the debt back on building the sports complex and paying the fee to operate and maintain it.
Yeah.
That's the general model that exists. And in my time as a city manager, I was proposed that model a number of times.
So really,
from developers.
Cities usually are the ones that do that?
They are. These are usually
like
publicly owned, and then are publicly financed and built, and then they usually hire an operator.
Gotcha.
That is skilled in the industry because that, with travel sports, that's what you want. You want to tap into the bigger network there. So they'll typically hire an operator to do that. As a city manager, I had developers propose that to me in the past, and I just every time I said, well, I we have a lot of other priorities out there I have to take care of: public safety, public infrastructure, other things. And my response always was, I don't want the city to do that. But if you want to build it and operate it, and we can share some of the additional tax revenue that comes in back to you, that's great. The other thing I didn't want was all the taxpayers of the community to be on the hook to pay this thing back if it wasn't successful.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like that was a good scenario. So in Springfield, the way the Scheels Sports Complex was put together is it's privately constructed, it's privately owned and operated, and then the city of Springfield shares back a portion of the additional tax revenues that are generated from operating the sports complex back to the developer.
Okay.
So the developer bears the risk. The developer makes the investment first. The developer only gets incentives back if they're successful running it. I liked that model to provide protection to the citizens.
So I'm not super keen on this. There's no money going to them prior to it go. Okay.
So what happens is the way the money comes back is the developer spends the money on the sports complex, and then they have to present those expenditures back to the city, and then there's a funding draw.
Gotcha.
In that way. That was important to me as a taxpayer of this community too.
Yeah.
Now, since that setup was unique, it took a little longer to get it financed too, right? Because it's not your typical model like that. The reason it was attractive to do it that way, there's a few of them. Location, right? It's located right next to the Scheels Sporting Goods store.
Mm-hmm.
Getting Scheels to commit and extend their commitment to the community to be here another 10 to 15 years was part of getting the sports complex, and they bought the naming rights. So obviously they were in favor of that.
Yeah.
The developer of the sports complex also owns the land adjacent to it. So sports complexes themselves on an operating basis are not typically profitable. They run a very close profit line on that.
Really? Okay.
And that's also why typically local governments own them.
Gotcha.
This model works, though, because they have the opportunity to do the adjacent development, right? The incentives that exist are only related to the sports complex, not to the other developments that happen around it. So,
Gotcha.
for example...
So for them, hopefully, as this is big and, they're not making a ton on it or whatever, around it is where they'll make the money.
So the city of Springfield, Sangamon County, the Park District, School District, Airport Authority, Mass Transit District, all the entities that levy property taxes all agreed to abate their property taxes on the sports complex property. So like this new hotel that's going up, that's not part of that abatement. So they abated the taxes on the actual sports complex because to keep the price of it.
And what does abate mean
I'm
for
sorry.
people that don't know?
Yeah, government speak. So
that's all good.
Let's say that right now, as a piece of farm ground, the sports complex is paying $1 in property taxes. And then they build the sports complex, and then the value goes up. And let's say now the tax is $3. Mm-hmm. They would not take the $2.
Okay.
The sports complex keeps paying the base value.
Gotcha.
But like, let's say the Sangamon County or the school district says, we're going to abate. That's what abate means. We're not going to take the extra off of that.
Is that like a permanent thing? Or
it's for 20 years,
okay,
up to a set amount based on the cost and the investment that's made in the sports complex. The reason that's important is, once again, most sports complexes are not owned by private entities. They're owned by local governments. Mm-hmm. So they don't have a property tax burden.
Yeah.
So when they bid for a tournament, the cost to run the facility, we have to be able to equalize that to still be competitive from a price standpoint.
Interesting.
Now, once again, all that development that happens around it, that's all that tax base just keeps going back to those entities. There's not anything getting in the way of that. And so the leaders of the other local governmental bodies understood that if we give a little bit on the sports complex itself, that when it's successful, we're going to get more than that back by the other development that happens around the community, but also adjacent to it.
Yeah.
So that took a while to negotiate, as you can imagine. That's a unique
it's a weird
arrangement.
thing to think about, because you look at it from the majority of the people here in town that they just are like, oh, our tax dollars are going to pay help some company build this thing that's going to make a bunch of money. You know what I mean? And I understand both sides of the argument. So that was one of the reasons. It's just I wanted to also hear more about it. I've read a little bit about it, but it's understanding it a little bit more is good.
The money flow of it's complex, and it's unfair to think a journalist can write one article in the newspaper or a minute-and-a-half story on television and explain it all to you.
Yeah,
it is. I have been invited to a lot of community groups around town to talk about that and to explain the protections that we have in there for the taxpayers. Yeah. The way I look at it is, if let's say you live here and you do not like the sports complex at all, you're not happy about it, and I'm sure there's people at that point. I tell those people, don't go out there and spend any money, and you won't be supporting it. Mm-hmm. So we're not drawing out of all the other tax dollars you're spending. This is designed to where the tax support's based on success, and the risk lies with the developer, not with all the taxpayers.
Yeah.
And that's a complicated way to put it through, and it's not typical, which also is why it's extended what it took to get it there. Because having to go to each individual governmental board and get this abatement, this word I use, approved. That has to be done at a public meeting. That can't be done it should not be done behind closed doors.
Right.
And so that whole process of developing that funding structure took a lot of time to be able to put together.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But it's coming to fruition. They're rapidly working out there.
I was like, we'll see if this thing ever gets started.
I get it.
Yeah, it's
I understand it.
Man.
So it's I think folks want to see more up in the air.
Well,
the unique thing about a sports complex, 80% of the cost is spent at or below the surface level.
Really? Wow.
Because there's a lot of drainage, the turf, all the things that go down.
Yeah.
The big thing you're going to see, though, is when that dome goes up.
That's going to be crazy. It's supposed to be the largest one in the world.
It is. It's 8 stories tall and 715 feet long. Springfield Clinic recently released a video out there on social media.
Yeah,
we shared it on the Growth Alliance site.
Had all the renderings and everything.
Yeah, and the dome builder developer is talking about it in detail. And you could fit 2 full-size football fields in it. The other thing I give people a comparison for is if you know the Scheels building right now, it's taller and twice as long as the Scheels building.
Wow. So
it's a very unique asset for a sports complex that's really going to help set it aside.
And especially with, sometimes we have harsh winters.
Right.
You know what I mean? And the opportunities it's going to open up for just in the cold months. It's pretty awesome. It's
going to help our hotels and small businesses too. We don't have a lot of tourism during those months.
Yeah.
So being able to put heads in beds, as they say at Visit Springfield, during the winter and during those colder months when we don't have a lot of activity is great. Another benefit to the community. So another unique aspect of the sports complex that gets overlooked sometimes is that the school district, I believe, did a really great job in their negotiations. They wanted to support the project, obviously. But what they negotiated is use of the facility for District 186 students.
Nice. That's awesome.
That kind of warms my heart because so many times these great things are built and other people get to enjoy them.
Screwed, yeah.
Yeah, it's like when do our kids get to play on there? And I think it's going to be cool to see the public school students out there get to access the state-of-the-art facilities.
Yeah.
It also lowered the expense the school district had to spend to upgrade and build additional facilities, sports facilities themselves.
Yeah, especially if they don't have the room or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
So they negotiated that in with their. I thought that was really brilliant on their behalf with Superintendent Gill and her board to say, hey, we want to see our students out there. It's going to help attract students into District 186, right? If you're a parent and athletics are important to you and your child, and there's a lot of people that are like that, you might pick a school district based on what the facilities look like. So that's an important part of it, too, that I'm really, really excited about.
Yeah. We're out in Sherman, so our kids will go to Williamsville. And, man, they just built I was like, man, you got an amazing facility.
I know.
You know what I mean? And I'm not, like, a huge sports guy, but it's awesome they have it. Then it's available if they want to get into that and do it, So I can completely understand that.
Yeah.
So I've seen some renderings of this thing. What all is going to be there?
Sure.
There's going to be obviously the big air dome.
Right. So there's going to be the dome. There's going to be another 8 all-purpose fields. So the reason I use that word all-purpose is because they're not just like 8 baseball diamonds. So these are multi-purpose fields that you can do baseball, little kid, big kid baseball. You can do little kid, big kid softball, play flag football. You can play lacrosse. You can play soccer. There's going to be some new sport that comes forward that probably Scheels sells the equipment to that we all need to get involved into, right? But the flexibility of that turf field allows them to attract all kinds of different tournaments there. And that's going to really be a nice feature of it. So it'll be all turf, and then you'll see all these lines on the field, right, for the different things that go on, fencing that can accommodate that. There'll be concession facilities, of course. There'll be a playground. You'll see the dome. Springfield Clinic is going to have facilities in there also to support like physical therapy and sports medicine, those types of things. You'll see those actually on the sports complex spot.
Gotcha.
And then the other development you see will be adjacent to that. The new Marriott Fairfield Inn is under construction right now. There's another number of other parcels right now that are in final negotiations for development too. So you're going to see other development out there. It's likely to be the kind of development that wants to take advantage of the people that are going to be there.
Right.
Okay. As far as size and scale, this complex could host a 120-team soccer tournament for a weekend.
Wow.
Gives you some idea of the impact. So my kids didn't play much soccer. Let's say there's 10 kids on a soccer team. Does that seem fair? Like that.
Yeah.
So, and they'll say 120 teams.
My kid was on a team that had 5. They just had enough to get out there. I was like, man, we need some subs. He's only 5 years old.
I grew up in Divernon, Illinois. 24 kids in my graduating class. I feel the pain.
Yeah.
So, I started 3 years of varsity basketball, not because I was good, because they just needed somebody.
Default.
But right. But you think about, so that's 1,200 players.
Yeah, that's
and
crazy.
they're probably not driving themselves there, right?
Right.
So they're bringing parents siblings, grandparents. So you start talking about thousands of people coming in town for one tournament.
Yeah.
And let's say we do that 2 dozen times, 3 dozen, 4 dozen times a year.
Mm-hmm.
Think about the scale of that,
Yeah.
the amount of money that you're going to see spent. And you're seeing development happen. So up at Stanford and Wabash and MacArthur,
Yeah.
up in that area, right? There's a restaurant there at that corner that's been redeveloped, added a strip mall in there.
Little, mini Dave and Buster style thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's not by accident. Malibu Jacks out at White Oaks Mall. I mean, they probably saw what was coming. There's a new hotel going on Capital City Shopping Center over on Dirksen Parkway, just north of the shopping center. There's a Home 2 Suites by Hilton. Going in there. I worked on that development. That's not by accident. So you're starting to see some ripple development out and around the community. So it's not all of it's going to happen at Legacy Point.
Yeah.
You're going to see a lot of other development that happens because of that.
So was it like originally they were going to put the outlet malls over there?
Yeah.
Was it just by chance that those didn't happen and then this came along, or was it kind of like in the middle of it? Or
I think it's important to go back and look at the history of that development.
Yeah.
Okay, so Scheels was built. We were in that happened right as the financial collapse happened in around 2010, 2011, 2009.
God, has it been there that long?
Yes, it has been. And so the idea was that was going to be a big retail center. All right, maybe not Le Mans, maybe something like that. So financial collapse hit. That put the hammer on the economy for a few years.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the same time, online shopping became a thing. Brick and mortar retail is not what it is.
Right.
There's a number of outlet malls around this country right now that are empty.
Yeah. We drove to Maine, and I remember driving just by some. It looked pretty empty.
Right. So retail's changed. The internet changed retail. So that outlet mall concept really wasn't something that made sense for the developer to pursue.
Yeah.
So they kept the land, and they kept working on different concepts that came forward. Every once in a while, something would come up, did or didn't happen for whatever reason. But what did happen is sports tourism grew rapidly. Mm-hmm. And during the pandemic, it was one of the only
it's
industry.
Crazy, sports.
It is.
Just the places popping up for indoor baseball training. There's been like 3 or 4 of them, and just in the last couple of years pop up.
Yeah, and we have 3 kids that are adults now, 29, 23, and 20. Okay, so we're not going to be going to sports tournaments. Right. I coached Little League for 17 years, baseball and softball.
Yeah,
but it was all recreational, so we never did travel sports. My daughter was a competitive gymnast for a while, so we did a little bit of it with that. That's a little different because it's not a meet every weekend, right? Mm-hmm. You're going a few times a year. But I got a little sense of it and what it looks like and the number of people that go on it. It's significant. So
my nephew and niece do competitive hockey. So my sister, they travel all over taking them to competitive hockey. And I'm like, oh, my God.
It's something that a lot of
every weekend.
Yeah, a lot of families really enjoy doing now. And during the pandemic, that really ramped up because the public leagues, so whether it's school leagues and things like that, pretty much got shut down, and it was safe to be outside, and so sports tourism saw another growth. Also, the city of Springfield did a study. There's so much talk about sports tourism, so I think it's important for everybody to remember this. Mayor Langfelder said we need to do an economic impact study, appointed an independent commission to look at it. Sports tourism, is that an opportunity for us, and should we have a sports complex here? That study came back and said yes on both accounts. Then Mayor Langfelder said, okay, to all you private developers, we have this study that shows it's going to work here. If you want to build a sports complex here, I want you to pay for your own study, site-specific study. And so that was the offer. The development team that's doing the sports complex did that. They paid for their own site-specific study.
And that's Legacy.
That's right. Okay. That looked at what scale makes sense here, what size makes sense here, and what will be the economic impact. So they paid for the site-specific study.
Let's build this biggest air dome in the world, baby.
Yeah, that's right. Let's do it. But so their study came back with the same decision. So this has been studied multiple times by smart people not from here that have said you should do this. And so that study is what also generated us going forward to the city and saying, you asked for this. This is what we want. And so that's the history behind the whole thing. We're probably lucky.
When did this whole thing kick off? Like the idea and probably trying to get this rocking and rolling?
The idea goes back a long way. I was a banker in Springfield in the mid-'90s, and I was a credit analyst, and I looked at a potential sports complex as a credit analyst.
Oh, really? Okay.
So it goes back a long time there. Let's see. And I started at the Growth Alliance in May of 2020. My second day on the job, I met with the sports complex developers.
Okay.
And so their study was almost done at that point. The mayor had already done the first study. So I think you're looking at like 2018. I might be off a year or two. But like in 2018, Mayor Langfelder commissioned the first study. These developers came in behind that. That study got released, I think, in the summer of 2020. And so that's really when it started ramping up. That's when the developers, once that they presented the study to the city council, that's when we started sitting down and negotiating this overall development agreement. That's what brought us to where we are today.
Interesting.
So it takes, the stuff I work on takes a long time.
Yeah, I can understand that.
You know, you want things to be good, not always fast.
Right.
You want them to be as fast as possible, but this is
seems like such a
big
perfect
deal.
Location. I mean, you got the highway, you got Scheels, the land's there. It's close to, basically all of town.
Yep.
No matter which direction you want to go or jump on the highway and circle around somewhere.
Yeah. I'm excited for the businesses in our community that we're going to have this. There's a lot of businesses that really took it on the chin during the pandemic.
Yeah.
Especially on the restaurant side of things. That's a really tough
Even
industry.
Still, the prices and stuff are crazy.
Labor's up, prices are up. People are making different choices. What I hope is that this is going to come along and we're going to be able to keep a lot of those folks in business.
Yeah.
That's my hope. And we have great local restaurants here.
I'm interested to see what starts going in out there.
It will be. Yeah, I not in a position to announce anything.
Yeah.
That's not what I do. I do have some knowledge of things that are being looked at there, the concepts, and I think the community is going to be excited about them when they show up.
Yeah, obviously for us it's great because, our primary client is a small business and helping market their stuff and get them exposure to get more clients. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, for us, it's also a good opportunity, even though we're not over there. But if more small businesses are opening, if there's more people in town, it's just a great opportunity to help get exposure for our clients to those people.
I hope through this podcast, small businesses will take the opportunity to talk to you about how you can use the tools that you're great at doing to help get more looks on their business.
Oh, yeah.
When people come to town, right? You know all that secret sauce.
Yeah.
We don't want to give it away because you can't get that away for free. Right? But seriously, if you're a small business in town and you want to figure out how you can maximize your benefit of the sports complex, they need to talk to people like you.
Yeah.
The marketing, the media tools that exist nowadays are
bizarre.
They're helpful and just a little bit scary.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
I always say, I was like, they're scary until you're using them to your advantage. Then it's pretty nice to have.
That's right. And we use them in the work we do too.
Yeah.
To get our message to the right target. That's the goal, right?
Yeah.
This is the target. How do we
get
a deep message and deep attention from them on something? So small businesses in our community need to look to maximize their benefit from the sports complex, and working with folks like you to figure out how to do that. I have no doubt in my mind you've thought about it and you know how to do it. So I hope they'll do that, because I want to see our small businesses in town get that big benefit from the sports complex.
Yeah. Yeah, I hope it I'm sure it will, but I think if it does everything that's planning on doing, I can't imagine that it's not going to be overall beneficial to the community.
Yeah.
Isn't there already out there in that area a higher tax rate or something, like an extra 1%
right.
or
so
something?
I wasn't sure how complex we want to get on this, but there's something that's called a business district. And what that is around that development, a business district is an additional 1% sales tax.
Okay, that's what.
And that 1% sales tax goes back to help pay for public infrastructure, stormwater, sewers, roads, traffic lights, things like that.
Yeah.
So that does exist out there. We had to reset that business district, and we expanded it up to Wabash and Stanford area.
Gotcha.
But once again, I want to be clear, none of that business district money pays for one piece of AstroTurf.
Right.
This is all for the roads and everything else. So let's say you wanted to open a business along MacArthur Boulevard just north of the sports complex. Okay. And to do that, you had to build an interior road, a public road that comes in, because traffic design, you don't want everybody stopping and starting right on Wabash, rear end accidents.
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. So for safety reasons, there's some interior, sometimes called frontage roads or things like that, just like you have near Scheels.
Yeah.
A business, instead of having to pay for that themselves, and instead of the government having to pay for it all, there's a way to draw money out of that business district tax to pay for that.
Interesting.
And so the individuals that are out there shopping, putting the burden on that infrastructure, are also helping pay for it.
Gotcha.
And also is if someone has strong opinions about that additional 1% sales tax and they don't like it, they can make a choice to not spend money there, right?
Right.
So I hope people will support it, but I also like the fact that they have choices, right? They can choose to whether they want to do it or not. So yeah, that's how that business district works.
Okay. Yeah, and you think about it when you're driving out to Scheels, there is so much land right there.
There is.
Like, who knows how far it could go, you know?
And the city, so under Mayor Davlin, was when Scheels was created. And I think the city deserves credit. I know Alderman Donnellan was the mayor's chief of staff at that time. That's when I was county administrator. So Alderman Donnellan and I worked together on a lot of things.
Okay.
And the vision they had. So think about doing that complex and building just a 2-lane road down there.
Right.
So the vision they had
ridiculous.
to build roads to accept development.
Yeah.
I mean, and think about me bringing a developer to town and driving up MacArthur and go, oh, yeah, there's land. And by the way, there's already a 4-lane separated with traffic lights and
I was going to say,
a bike path.
There's already spots
right.
with traffic lights and everything, yeah.
Right.
And that is pretty cool that the bike path all wraps right around there, too.
It does.
You
It
know?
goes around there, and that's going to be nice. And it's going to be a great thing. And, yes, there'll be a lot of people from out of town there, but it's kind of like state fairgrounds. That's still ours to enjoy every day, right, when we live here. So it's going to be a benefit to people every day, too.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Anything else we missed regarding that? I'm trying to think if I had any other questions or anything.
So one other thing I would say, if we have enough time, is the county. I also want to give credit to the Sangamon County Board. There's a major transportation project getting ready to happen that's also going to benefit MacArthur Boulevard. So if you're familiar with Woodside Road and Iron Bridge Road,
Yep.
And the traffic, the train tracks that go there, the county is going to be starting construction in the spring.
Oh, they're starting. We were just talking about
on
this.
a new intersection there. So if you're coming north up Iron Bridge Road, the designed road is going to go over the tracks and land at Woodside Road west of where the rail crossing is right now.
Yeah.
And if you're going east on Woodside Road, you're going to go under the tracks.
Interesting.
It'll be an overpass
We're
and an
talking about
underpass
how they
there.
wondered how they were going to do that.
That's how they're going to do that. It's fascinating. Brian Davis is Sangamon County engineer that could really go into detail about that.
Interesting.
That project's been designed. Let's see, I was county administrator in 2008. I worked on that project.
Okay.
That's how long these things take.
Yeah.
So at the same time, the county just had a public hearing that they're going to extend MacArthur from where it stops right now on I-72 just south of Scheels down to that new intersection at Woodside Road.
Okay.
So that's also going to be a 4-lane separated with a raised median like you have on MacArthur right now, north of 72. So think about that opportunity.
Convenience.
With what that's going to do, it's going to take traffic pressure off veterans. If you've been on Veterans Parkway at 5 o'clock, you know what I'm talking about.
Oh, it's crazy.
It's going to take pressure off veterans. It can take pressure off of Old Chatham Road. And it's going to open up all that land there south of I-72 for potential development too.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's great to see these local governmental bodies having vision and thinking about what this means, right?
Yeah.
So expanding, doing that intersection at Woodside and Iron Bridge, and then extending MacArthur down there right now when it's just a farm field, says to the community, we expect growth.
Yeah.
And I truly believe that if you expect growth, you get it. And if you expect contraction, you get it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's exciting to see those governmental bodies working together and aligning on those efforts.
Did you get any pushback from some of the existing sporting places? You know, I think of like, the Sassa Fields out there and there's just different spots that kind of Spartan Sports Park, you know what I mean? Where
There were questions. I will say SSGA is a group that the sports complex developers met with early on, and they're actually going to be moving out to the sports complex.
Gotcha. Okay.
So they're part of the sports complex, which is going to help grow their program.
Yeah.
Also, a lot of conversations with the YMCA about their soccer program and how can they have some alignment there. There is a Spartan Park down in Chatham. They expressed some concern about the sports park being developed. They're in the village of Chatham, sports parks in the village of Springfield.
Right.
But what I know from my little bit of experience with sports tourism is when a big tournament comes to town, all the activities don't happen at one place.
Yeah.
And so you start seeing things happen at like a Spartan Sport Complex or other places too. So there'll be a benefit to everybody else.
Yeah.
But there is competition, right? There's a private industry side of this thing, and there's competition, and I do understand and appreciate their concerns. But yes, there were some.
Okay.
Yep.
Man, I think that we pretty much hit on everything.
See,
I
we
wanted to just
covered a lot of ground. We talked about government philosophy, a sports complex, how we do economic development, how hard it is to own a small business.
How do you feel about, I guess last question, how do you, like, I feel like in the United States, stuff takes so long to get done. And it's just, there's just so many like regulations and permits.
Yeah.
And it's like, I mean, would you agree with that? It seems like it takes like ridiculously long. Like, you know, they did this high speed train or whatever. And I'm like, this thing took forever. I remember talking about this like 10, 15 years ago.
I worked on that when I was at the county too.
Yeah,
so
like,
I think life in general is a lesson in persistence.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a marathon, not a sprint. I work really hard on the part that I can influence.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of it I can't. But on the part that I can influence, I try to look wherever I can and try to do things concurrently, not consecutively, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do we run things parallel to each other? How do we kind of take some of the air out of the process and shorten it? And there's a really good book out there called The Goal. You ever heard about The Goal?
Mm-mm.
It came out like back in the 80s. It's really geared towards manufacturing. I highly recommend it. They even did a movie that's if you want to look back and get a sense of the fashion back in the 80s, you can watch the movie called The Goal. So the goal was, I had quite a bit of work with manufacturers when I was in Decatur because of the heavy manufacturing influence there. And a lot of manufacturers require people to read The Goal. And it's about the theory of constraints, basically what it's about. And this is an operating systems kind of study. So I have an MBA, and part of that is going through these operations courses. The theory of constraints is that you always look for where the bottleneck is, because no system will ever move any faster than the most constrained and the longest step.
Yeah.
Right? And what you do is you try to devote all the resources to the bottleneck, and you solve that as a bottleneck. The problem is once you do that, something else becomes the bottleneck, right? Because something else is shorter. So if you really want to improve the efficiency of a system, you always have to be going back and looking for that bottleneck. And this book, The Goal, really, it's a fictional story that teaches the theory of constraints. So the book itself is fiction.
Yeah.
But a college professor wrote it because the theory of constraints was kind of boring for people, I think. So they wrote a piece of fiction about it. So what we do in economic development is we try to do that too. So we're constantly going back and looking at how can we speed up the development process here. So one of the things we have a big focus on this year is on what's called site readiness. So in a general sense, we get things called requests for information from site selection consultants. We have a client looking for a site. It's got to be 40 acres, this much power, this much water. They have all kinds of requirements.
Yeah.
X number of miles from the interstate interchange, whatever. So we take that and then we send it out to people in the community that have sites in our own database, look for sites that meet that, and send them back. We might get 72 hours to reply for that.
Really? Wow.
So if we don't have deep connections with the site owner and all of our own information, we miss out on opportunities. The other thing that happens is let's say someone picks that site and they say, what kind of environmental issues are there? Oh, darn, I got to go back now and do an environmental study. Well, that's going to take 30 days.
Yeah.
So what we're doing is through our experience is we're doing as much of that ahead of time as we can. And so we're getting sites, we're going deep on them, we're doing site surveys, we're doing the environmental background on it so we can give it to a developer and say, hey, look, we tried to think about what your questions are, and we tried to answer them. Yeah. At the same time, we sit on what's called the Development Policy Council. This is a group that the Chamber and the Growth Alliance operate together, and on a monthly basis, we have groups of private developers and professional engineering firms, the Growth Alliance, Chamber of Commerce, and then all the local governmental people. And we're constantly looking at the development process and looking to where we can make it more effective and efficient. Okay. So there is a deliberate effort right now, and there have been changes made since that group's been operating, changes to the road ordinance requirements for development, changes to how plans are reviewed and building permits are issued, changes to drive-through requirements for different types of businesses because the way people shop now, much different, right?
Yeah.
Like, for example, the drive-through
that convenience.
The drive-through requirement for a bank was excessive. And how often do you go to the bank? I mean, I love my local bank, but
definitely don't go in very often.
Right.
But yeah.
Right. But the requirement for what
Hardly
they had to
ever.
have for
I mean,
drive-through.
deposit and checks with your phone.
That's right.
Yeah.
The requirement for the drive-through was set back on how people banked in the 80s.
Right.
So, okay, so going through that, kind of like that theory of constraints and constantly going back and looking at where we can take some of the air out of the process is the best thing we can do. Things always take too long. I can't influence all of it, but I try to where I can.
The problem is like everything just moves so fast nowadays. You know what I mean? Like where technology, for example, the train thing, like, is that thing even relevant anymore? I don't know, but it's like, it's just, technology moves so fast that it's like, we almost have to like figure out a way to, but you also, obviously I understand you have to be careful, make sure things are right, do all those stuff.
It's really hard. Like when you think about the development process, I mean, I want it to go as fast as possible. At the same time, if a development's going to change how a piece of land is used, I think we need to give the neighbors time to know about it.
Oh yeah.
So it's like it needs to be, it needs to be fast, but we need to make sure people are protected. And you're right. But I think what's important is to constantly look at the process with the spirit of making it better. That sometimes that means faster, but at the end of the day, we need to look at it. We want it to be better.
Right.
And so there are groups. We are working on that. I can't say a year from now I'll see you and you say, Ryan, man, everything's way better. Everything's a lot faster now. I can't say that's going to happen.
Just got to move towards it, right?
That's right. There's people though that share your interest in that.
Yeah, I'm sure there is. It's just it's crazy how fast some countries will do something. It's like, boom, this thing's up, and I understand, it's just different. But
the Constitution, sometimes it helps us, sometimes it slows us down. I don't know but the good thing is it's for everybody.
Yeah. So, well, man, it was awesome talking to you today.
Yeah,
Learned
thanks.
a lot. Hopefully, all the viewers, got some more insight to all that stuff. I think it's super interesting to understand and have clear knowledge on.
Yep.
So definitely appreciate you coming on. And what's your guys' website? People go check out?
Yeah, they can check us out at thriveandspi.org. We hope that you'll also follow our social media links. You can learn about the staff and our board there. Also, you can see our phone number and our email addresses. And, if you're a community group, if you're a local business, if you just want to chat about what we have going on, we're in the business of doing that. So don't feel like you're going to bother us.
Cool.
Reach out to us. We'll be responsive. If you're a business that wants some of the resources to recruit people, I mean, just call and ask the question, and we'll do the best we can to get you an answer. If it's not with us, we'll reach into our quiver full of arrows and hopefully pull off the right one for you.
Yeah. Awesome, Ryan. Well, appreciate you coming on today. Thanks,
you.
everybody.